Good afternoon, everybody. It's Richard De Silva here from Banyard Solutions, welcoming you to another e-permits webinar. This one's looking at contractor compliance and contractor management. We've got a number of people on, but I keep seeing new ones adding, so I'm just going to give it another 1 minute to see if anybody else logs in. Yeah, there's another one. So just give 1 minute just to see if we can get any more people lined up for the start. So I'll go quiet, but I will be back in less than a minute. Okay, we'll make a start. The attendee list has slowed itself down. Welcome again to the e-permits webinar entitled Ensuring Contractor Compliance in 2020, with the tagline of "It needs vision, not hindsight." So we're looking at how you can prepare in advance and make sure everything is in place in advance to make sure that not only contractors are compliant, but you're compliant at your end of things, and everything should go smoothly and, most importantly, safely. So some of the key issues, they're not just in 2020, these issues have been around for quite a while, but the uncertain climate is limiting the appetite for increasing permanent headcount in many organizations. And this is driving a lot of them to outsource a lot of their non-core services to specialist providers like FM providers and consultants. Now, one thing you can't really outsource is liability. So health and safety compliance must apply to all. So whatever constraints you would want to put in place around your own people, if they're doing a particular task for you, you want to see that those levels of compliance are met by whoever it is that you're contracting. And sometimes the larger organizations that you contract, they will be then hiring subcontractors and subcontractors. You've still got to understand and know that everything is going to be done properly and safely, and that everybody is properly trained and qualified. So it's a bit of a vicious circle. If you're taking people out of the loop internally, but you still need to check things like insurance levels, inductions, training and competency, risk assessment, safe methods of working, and so forth on every job, that if you wanted to try and be 100% sure, that's almost a full-time job in itself, if not more than a full-time job in itself. So somehow you need to break this circle and try and find a way of managing contractors to the levels of safety that you would apply yourselves, and therefore you feel confident that the liability that you may have resultant is minimized. So getting it right is actually quite simple. We're really ensuring that the right people with the right training and competency, inductions from the right contractor with the right insurances and certifications are on the job, on site to do the right job at the right time, in the right place, have the correct methods and risk assessments in place to do that work safely. Pretty straightforward. So the right people. So are the people that turn up the people that were specified originally by the contractor that were going to come and do the job? The people that are actually specified on the permit to work. The right training and competency. Do these people have the proper training and certification? Is it current, and have they been inducted? Is it the right contractor company, the one that's specified on the permit to work, and that someone hasn't sent a substitute at the last minute? Does this contractor company have all the required insurances to conduct the work on your site, and are they all current? Have they turned up to do the job specified on the permit to work? That might sound pretty straightforward, but very often we have found in talking to clients that they'll often go on site and find a contractor that come in to do one job, but started another just because they were there at that time. They thought they'd get it done. That not only puts the contractor at risk, it puts the client at risk as well. And are they doing job in the right place specified on the permit to work? And have they turned up at the right location and at the right time? And are the RAMs, the risk assessments and method statements, pertinent for the job to be done in that location? So there's lots of things that have to be considered, and these things need to be considered by yourselves and also by the contractor. So what we're trying to do is ensure that we give the contractor as much responsibility for their stuff as we can, and then you take the responsibility for the approval process. So where possible, the standard way of doing it would be you've phoned a contractor up, you've said, this is the job I need you to do. They will then submit their RAMs, they'll submit who's coming, when they're coming, what they're going to do, what equipment they'll wear, and so forth to you, and you would review that, and then you would say yes or no. So that's the simplified process, and that's what we're looking to try and achieve with the e-permit system. Now, we recently received a very nice comment that was put on one of our Capterra processes by a chap called Greg Markham, who's technical director of MCOR. He described the system very simply as the best way to control contractors that I've ever seen. He then looked at the pros and the cons of the system, and the key pros were it was logical and easy to use. It pushes the onus on the contractors to supply the detail, but also means that the controllers internally have to review and approve them, and most importantly, in a timely manner. So by trying to ensure that contractors submit requests in advance means that you've got time to go through them, consider them, check that everything's in place and safe, check that there are no clashes taking place at the time, i.e. have we got two jobs taking place in the same place at the same time, and do all this in a timely manner so that when the contractor arrives on site, you have the confidence that everything's safe to go ahead, and the contractor has the confidence that everything can go ahead. And the key thing is software can flex to suit an application or the client requirements. The permit system, for example, it's a Lego kit. Basically, you define the shape of the box that you want to build, and then you can use the Lego kit to build exactly what you want. The key to that is that you don't need to change your processes to meet the requirements of a software package. The software package will flex itself to meet the requirements that you have. And to us, one of the big statements was the last one. What are the cons? Not much not to like. Just wish more customers had this system and it was in wider use across the industry. Particularly companies like MCOR, they put e-permits into a number of different clients. And once those clients are running, they can MCOR see how simple it is to operate. They would like to have that rolled out across more of their clients, providing obviously they can persuade the client that this is the way that they should go. So a good endorsement there. So let's look at the actual workflow process, so the operational process and some of the workflow processes involved. So as I said earlier on, key thing is you contact a contractor and say, I need you to come in and do a particular piece of work. So that contractor then has access to your e-permit system through a username and a login. It restricts them to just their own activities and their own domain, if you like, within the work that they do for you. So they will put in a request into the system. And once they put the information in, and the key information is who's coming, when are we coming, what are we going to do, how are we going to do it, where are we going to do it? They're the key things. The system will then go away and it will, in the background, do lots of checks on the information that's been put into the system. So it'll check to say, okay, are there already approved RAMs in the system for this job? And this is most applicable for PPM type work. So if I do a regular piece of work for you every couple of months, I can submit my RAMs to you once, you can approve them, they're then in the system, and then when I go through the process of doing the same job again in 2 months' time, I can just attach the existing RAM. This has two benefits. For the contractor, it means I don't have to resubmit RAMs to you every time I'm going to come in and do work for you, even if it is PPM work. And more so for yourselves at the client end, when you receive a permit request, if there are RAMs already attached, you know you've already approved them. So you don't have to read those RAMs every time for that type of standard work. That actually should relieve you with some time. So when you have the one-off jobs, or not so much the emergency jobs, but the ones where the contractor is coming in to do a one-off piece of work because there's been a fault or something in your building, they're the ones that you can then put the time and effort into in checking. But again, if you get the contractors to submit them early, you can review them, and then they're in the e-permit system. So should you ever need to have that job repeated, you already have RAMs pertinent to that. And of course, RAMs can have validity dates. So typically clients use a year. So once a RAMs has been approved, it's tagged for a year. And then as that year comes up, people then get alerted that RAMs need to be either resubmitted or reapproved. It may be a case with PPM RAMs that I would just resubmit to you the old ones. You would look at them again and say, yep, that's fine, they're approved, and then they're valid again for a period of a year. So it will manage all of those checks within the system. It also checks things such as insurances for contractors. So if this contractor company is coming in and you have rules that say you have to have 2 million public liability, if they don't have that level of insurance, or more likely maybe the insurance has expired, then the contractor is alerted that they need to make sure this insurance is in place before they would be allowed to start working on the job. One of the most important things is training. So if I've nominated Joe and Fred on the permit request, the system will go away and check what activities are we going to be doing on this permit. So we're doing hot works at site, at height, in a confined space. It will then check the training records of everybody on that permit and double check that they have the prerequisite requirements or the prerequisite training requirements to conduct that job. And the system also allows things such as PPE checks. So you may have, for example, a standard minimum, hard hat, high-vis jacket, safety boots. So that will appear on the list. But the contractor may be saying, well, I'm coming in to do this particular job, so I'm bringing in my welding kit, I'm bringing in safety visors, and I'm bringing in goggles. So all that can go onto that permit request, so that when it comes to you, you should have everything that you need. The key thing is this permit request will only cross this barrier and come to you when it is compliant. So that's the key. If we look at the workflow process, and I'm just going to go through this very quickly. Obviously, when you get access to the presentation, you can look at it in more detail at your own leisure. But we're just saying the contractor can asked to come into work on site. Do you have the RAMs module? If you do, it's asking if RAMs exist for the job. If they don't, contractor has to create them. They have to be approved, and then once they're approved and in the system, we can move on to the next part. There, where the contractor can create the permit request. And within e-permits, if you're coming in to do a job, and I mentioned the work at height, confined space, and hot works, e-permits will actually create a bundle of 4 permits: an access permit to allow me on site, and then 3 high-risk permits, work at height, work in a confined space, and hot works. If you use the contractor compliance module in e-permits, it will check the company's details are compliant and warn them if any information needs to be updated, such as insurance and so forth. And if you have what we call the worker compliance module, it tracks all the training and competency inductions and so forth. Now, training is a hard stop on the system. So if someone doesn't have training, this contractor cannot submit this permit request to you. They can submit the request if they're not inducted or if the insurances are out of date, because the contractor is alerted to that and they have time to make sure those things are done before they turn up to do the job. Training is an absolute hard block. If someone on there is not trained to do the defined work, you cannot submit that permit request. Now, that means to you, when you do get a permit request, you know that it's compliant. Okay, so we go back to our process. So the contractor has now completed that. And now what happens is that electronically, emails are now sent to various people within your organization who are the approvers of those types of permits. So you'll only get the things that are actually pertinent to yourself. So first of all, you have a request for access, and that will go to, for example, the site manager. And on that access request, it'll give various bits of information about the permit, and it'll also show you things such as clashes. So have I got other activities taking place at the same time? And if I do, I can make an informed decision on whether or not allow that job to take place at the same time. I can review the permits from that other job. I can contact the other approvers in that for that other job, and we can make a decision between us as to do we allow them or which one do we have to bounce. And then you're bouncing it or allowing it on an informed decision basis. Health and safety would receive things such as confined space permits or worker height permits. Then you'll have technical representatives and technical people who will also be involved in assessing hot works permits. And you may have more than one person. For hot works, for example, you may need both the site manager, health and safety, and technical representatives within that. So permits get routed to the appropriate people to make the decisions on whether or not they think it's safe. Now, reality of life means things don't go as planned, and sometimes you need to do additional work. So if I'm doing this, for example, hot works in a confined space, it's most likely I'll probably need to put a fire systems isolation in so that I can isolate the fire systems in that area, conduct the hot works without setting off the alarms, the sprinklers, and everything else that goes in it. So in that situation, the system will now also allow internal permit requests to go to your own internal team, who will provide you with the isolation services to do that job. So the system has now automatically created another permit in the bundle that again is now signed off by other people. So in that approval process, again, I'll just go quickly through it. You've received the compliant permit request from the previous section. The access permit is routed to the correct people for approval. If there are no high-risk permits, it's only access, because it could be inspection work, I could be checking out the fire extinguishers or whatever. If the access permit is approved, then the contractor is notified. If I've got high-risk permits involved, then it goes through another process where all the high-risk permits are routed to the appropriate APs. It identifies if isolations are required. If they are required, it'll create those isolation requests and see if they get approval. And then if there are any other high-risk permits, if they're approved, yes, everything's notified, and the contractor is then going to be told. If any one person in that loop rejects the permit, the whole permit bundle is rejected. So if, for example, everything, the hot works, the worker height, the confined space, and the access was all okay, but you can't do the isolation, that whole permit bundle will be rejected. So going back to our process again, we've now got the situation where all the permits have been approved. And what that means is now a message now comes back to the contractor to say, all the permits have been approved. Here is the permit bundle, so the contractor can review those permits, and they know then that they're allowed to turn up at the appropriate time on the appropriate date to do the job that's specified on that permit. Now, the idea is to try and corral contractors to do this sort of thing in advance. Very often we hear from permit managers saying, this is just going to add more time to me because, 8:30 in the morning, I've got a queue of 20 people in front of me wanting a permit. This is trying to get away from that. So rather than having queues of people there, the contractors turn up, they've already got their permits, you've already approved those permits, all you have to do is actually issue them. If someone turns up that hasn't got the appropriate permit for that day, they don't get in. So now the contractor's arrived on site. So we've gone through that request and approval process. The contractor's now going to start actually doing that job at the appropriate time on the day. So the first thing that will happen is when they turn up, they'll be at the security desk or your FM desk, whatever your process is. And the first thing you'll want to do is check they've got the right personal protective equipment for the job. So within the system, you can specify the PPE that has to be worn for this job, and you basically just do a kit check. Guys, show me that you've got all the stuff that you're supposed to have, and every person needs to have the appropriate kit. So this can now be checked on that permit document. So PPE is safe, PPE is done. We can now go through the issuing process, and there are two ways that that can be done. Some clients still wish to retain the paper process, so they would go through the process of printing a permit, doing a wet signature process all the way through the line, and then at the end of that process, scanning and uploading the document so you have the archive record in e-permits. Or you can go down the path of doing electronic signatures on a tablet or a smartphone, where first of all the AP can sign a permit, then the contractor can sign acceptance of it at the time of issue. That permit that's now had the issue signatures on, so it's not a completed document, it's a part completed document, that can then be emailed to the contractor as well. So if they're challenged on site, they can pull out the tablet or the smartphone and they can show that they have got that appropriate permit document. Same thing happens at the back end of a job. When it's completed, it will be signed off by both parties, the contractor when they finish the job, and then the approvers when they've gone through the process of doing any on-site checks or whatever. The benefits of electronic signatures is that you can now do this sort of thing at the place of work. So typically for hot works, you'll want to go through the process of doing electronic checklists, safety checklists, go through the process of ticking off the boxes with the contractor that both parties are absolutely happy that everything is safe, and they can then go forward with that document. So that's all been done, and the access permit has now been issued. We're now looking at, for example, you may need to do some dynamic risk assessments on site before you start the work. Dynamic risk assessments, for example, if I'm going to be working on the roof, I may have all the training that's required, but if it's pouring with rain or there's 50-mile-an-hour wind, I will have to do a dynamic risk assessment on the roof before the work can commence. So the current process, I can complete a risk assessment, either electronic or paper. At the end of the job, if it's electronic, I can upload it to the permit bundle for the job in e-permits. And at the end of the job, if it's paper, I just need to scan it and upload it into e-permits. We are in the process, though, of developing a equivalent of a mobile app, I suppose. And you can download any pre-stored DRAs, and these may be client-specific DRAs. You can complete it online, upload the DRAs to the permit bundle, and because it's within the app, it will know which permit document you're working on, because it knows who you are as you've logged in. It's time-stamped, so you can then see that it was actually done at the appropriate time beforehand. And if there's no mobile or internet connection, sometimes you don't get it in the basement, then it will be all the information in the dynamic risk assessment will be cached and uploaded automatically when it is done. So all of these things, such as time-stamping, are all there for the audit trail process, so that you can actually prove that things were done at the right place, at the right time, prior to the work starting. So the dynamic risk assessments have been done, and then the next part of the process, again, before you actually start work, is to actually go through the safety checklists. And these are done electronically. This is an example of a typical permit that will come out of the e-permit system. So this is a work at height permit we're looking at here. Gives all the details about the job, what's going to be done, where it's going to be done, and so forth. This is the safety checklist, so you can tick off the boxes, and it can either be mandatory that every question has to be answered. You can have yes, no, not applicable, depending on what your requirements are within that process. Here's the information about, oops, sorry, slide. Here's the information about the permit document itself. So it was signed by this chap at this particular time, and it was received by this guy at this particular time. And these are your liability statements, if you like. So how adhere has confirmed that he's checked that all the safety precautions are in place and it's safe for the contractor to carry out the work. The contractor underneath accepts responsibility for work, and it's really whatever words you want on there to minimize any liability you may have. Things such as, I will work according to the RAMs and so forth. So that's a copy then of the permit document, the issue process, and that's effectively what this guy, Steve Chandler, would have on his smartphone once it's been emailed to him when that permit document has been issued. So safety checklists are done, and now we're in that issue process. Again, you can look at this at your leisure when you have a look at the webinar at a later date. But it's just taking you through, is the contractor on the list today? If not, send the contract away. They need to turn up on the specified date at the specified time. So if they are on the list, are the people on the permit the correct ones? If not, and it does happen, someone could be off sick, you may need to replace someone on the job. What the system will then do is it allows you to change names on that permit document when they arrive, and it will then go through the training and induction checks. Now, if a person that has now been substituted doesn't have an induction, they can go through the induction in the e-permit system with an induction module, and then once they've passed that, they're then through the loop and they're now able to go through and have those permits issued. It'll check PPE if you have the PPE module. Have you got the correct PPE for the task? If you haven't, send them away. And then finally, if you've got the electronic signatures module, you can electronically sign those permits out. If you don't, you print the permit into a bundle and you wet sign the access authorization and so forth through that process. So once all the high-risk permits have been issued, you're now able to actually start the work. When the work's completed, you then need to go through a close process. And the close process is fairly similar. Again, electronic signatures, checking that the work has been completed, checking it's been completed satisfactorily. There's methods where you can actually take photographs of the workplace and upload those photographs as evidence. There are, for example, times you might go to the place of work the day after the job was done, Saturday. You'll internally want to close that permit off on Monday when you're in work. You go to the place of work, and lo and behold, the contractor has left all the waste material in the hallway. The RAMs clearly state that they should take away the waste material. So you can make comments against that permit closure process, specifying there was a non-compliance by the contractor. You can photograph it, you can upload it in there, so you've got all the evidence trail about what the contractor hasn't done properly on the job when they're there. So once all they've been signed off and done, you're now in the place where everything is now signed all the way through the process. So issue, dynamic risk assessment, safety checklist, and any close audit that's been done. Excuse me. And the close process workflow again, job's been completed. Was it completed okay? Yes. Sign it off. Wet signatures on paper or electronic signatures if you've got the electronic signatures module. And then the job is closed. And then what that means is all that information is then brought together and archived. Everything is now audit trailed, and it's all stored within e-permits. So no longer filing cabinets or box files full of paper. You're now in a position where you have all the relevant information to hand, and you can go back into the system through a reporting process. You could, for example, want to look at, show me how many hotworks jobs were done by this contractor on this site between these dates, or show me how many work at height permits were issued between these dates across all my sites in London. So you can dice and slice the data how you want to. You can access individual permits. You can go to an individual permit number itself if you know that number. If you don't, you know the date it was done, just look for all permits on that date. They'll all come up in a list, and then you're able to go into that permit document and go back and review it. That's important. If there is a future issue on something, you need to have this review because of any investigation. The information's to hand. No more scrabbling around between multiple filing cabinets to check that you've got the permit document. You can get a copy of the RAMs and make sure that that's attached to them. You've got all the training records from the people in another filing cabinet somewhere else. Make sure that all of those are tied together. So if there is an investigation, you're not picking bits of information from all over the place, or sorry, I should say, hoping to pick the bits of information from all over the place to minimize the time that the investigation will take. It's all there. You could even give AHSE a read-only login to the system, to the reporting system, and they can go and do whatever they want to within there to look at permits and see how they've been done and how they've been managed. Permits in the system are all compliant. We know that from the start point. So therefore, the job of any investigation, and let's be honest, accidents will happen. There's nothing we can do to stop accidents happening. What we want to do is make sure that you minimize any liabilities should an accident happen on your site. So by showing the full audit trail process, there is evidence there that you've done everything that you needed to do to make sure that job could be done safely. So that's taking you through that whole way that e-permits in particular will manage the contractor right at the beginning in terms of go away and create the permit request. Now that's not mandatory. You can make permit requests on behalf of your contractor. Yeah, there are some clients out there who have very small specialist one-man band contractors who come in to do a very, very unique task, and they may not be computer literate. So you can create those for them. On the telephone call, you say, okay, when are you available to come in? Next Tuesday. Who are you going to send? Joe and Mike. Great. And you fill that in, and the system will then go away and do all the checks for you. So when the contractor turns up, there's the documents. The RAMs are already there because they've been submitted before. So you can do it on your contractor's behalf, should you want to. So hopefully that's just taken you through a process and showing you how we're able to do that. In terms of just quickly about the e-permits way of doing that, e-permits is structured in a modular fashion. So the core module is what we call permit workflow. And you saw, we looked at those flow charts, there were some yellow areas. These are modules that you can add to the core system. So the permit workflow module does all the things that we talked about in terms of that workflow for raising permits, approving permits, and closing them. It stores all the documents, stores the audit trail, produces all the reports, and does the key thing called class checking, checking that they haven't got two jobs taking place in the same place at the same time, or on the same piece of kit at the same time, or maybe on dependent services. One job needs the water on, one needs it off. Mutually exclusive, someone somewhere has to make a decision, but that's a decision for a human being, not for the machine. Then we have the compliance module. So the RAMS compliance that we talked about at the beginning, this allows contractors to submit RAMS to you, and through another workflow process, they'll get routed to the correct people within your organization who can approve RAMS. And then once they're in the system, they can be applied anytime up to whatever the RAMS management system says of they're valid for 1 year or whatever. You're able to review RAMS whenever you want to. So even though I said that permit request has been made, it's been approved, when you come to actually do the work, so if I'm going there to do that safety checklist with the contractor, I still have the ability within the e-permit system to click on a link and it'll take me to see the RAMS. So before that guy starts work, I just want to do one more check on the RAMS. Everything's there in one place at one time. We have the work contractor compliance module. This will look at things such as insurance checks. There's a vendor approval process. So as you start to onboard contractors into the e-permit system, they can put all their information in, but they will not be able to start doing any permit generation or whatever until you've clicked the box to say, yes, you've checked all their information and you're happy with it. So you can then approve that vendor on e-permits and they can then go away and start using the e-permit system. And it also manages contractors in terms of any asbestos requirements. So are they an asbestos qualified contractor? We also have the worker compliance module. This one looks at training and competency checking. It keeps hold of the training and competency records, so you can actually upload training and competency certificates into the system. It'll hold information about the date the qualification was gained, and it will know that, for example, work at height training might expire every 2 years, hot works trainings every year, and it keeps a check on all of those things, and then will flag up to the contractor, your guy needs to have his training updated within the next few weeks, or guess what? He won't be allowed to go on any permits. You can also do background checks on security, eligibility to work, and so forth within the system. And they're the core modules. And then finally, we have a number of optional modules that you can add to it. So to enhance the worker compliance module, we have the video induction and test module that I mentioned to you earlier on in the process. This enables you to embed your video or your PowerPoint within the ePermit system. Anybody that needs to go through the induction process then can access that through the ePermits front page. They can conduct that or go through that video, and the system will embed 50, 100 questions behind it. It'll randomly pick 10, and I've got to score 9 out of 10 to be inducted. So if I don't get 9 out of 10 in the test, I've got to do it again before I can be inducted. So it'll keep me going through the loop until I've actually passed the test. There's the PPE module that I also mentioned earlier on, where you can make a check on PPE. So you can specify core PPE, the contractor can specify additional PPE, whatever combination that you want within that. And that can then be checked off when the contractor arrives. Yes, it's always in the RAMs, but if it's on the permit document, it's much easier to do that as part of your issue process rather than remembering I must go to the RAMs document, open it up and check the PPE. It's there on the permit document and you can tick it off as you go. And then on the additional modules we have here, we've got electronic signatures, which we've discussed. There's a document module where you can hold a whole range of things, toolbox talks, templates for risk assessments, whatever documents you might want to make available to your contractors can be held within the system. We also have a new module we released a little while ago called automatic permit splitting. If I'm coming in to do work for you and I'm coming in to do, let's say, 5 days, I'm coming in Monday to Friday in a couple of weeks' time, you may prefer internally that you really want to have a separate permit for every day of the week. So you only want work to take place between the hours of 6 and 6, for example, every day of the week. There are two ways of doing that. One, you can generate that 1 week permit and make sure on the permit in big bold letters, it says this permit is only valid between the hours of 6 and 6. So if someone did turn up at an odd hour, security would see that on the permit document and say, no, sorry, you've got to go away. The other way of doing it is to actually automatically split the permits up. If I know that I've got to have 5 permits for that week's work, as a contractor, I really, really don't want to be sitting there drawing up 5 separate permit requests and submitting those requests to you. What the system will do, it'll say, okay, I put in a permit request from Monday to Friday. When it gets submitted, it says, right, the rules are it's 1 permit a day, and it will split those permits up automatically so that you will end up getting 5 permits, and on each day you will issue each of those permits separately. So that's an enhancement that was put in based on a number of requests from clients out there that needed to do that process because they wanted separate permits every day. And most of these additional modules have all come from client request. So people say it'd be nice if we could enhance the system this way. We will always look at those requests. We very rarely do customer specific requests. We have done them in the past, but we would do them just for that customer, and it would just be a wrapper around the outside for that client. Most of the other ones, if we look at them and we think, actually, they are applicable to a whole range of customers, then what will happen is we will develop those ourselves and then sell them as additional modules to any clients that actually want to have them. So the bottom line is this is the bit that you have to have. All the other things are optional. Now, we have some clients, for example, some of the banks that are going through global rollouts at the moment. They said to us, look, it's all well and good, but in India, we don't have a concept, or they don't have the concept of RAMs and training and competency the same level as we do here in the UK. So for those clients, when they've installed it in those countries, they haven't taken the RAMs compliance or the worker compliance modules. They can add them at a later date if and when they get those parts or those contractors up to the level of compliance that they want to, but they don't need to take it right at the beginning. So clients can have just the permit workflow module and, for example, electronic signatures. And that could be the system that they start off with and then add any other bits that they want to over time. So hopefully what that's done, that's been able to take you through the process, show you graphically what the operational and workflow processes are. I say by all means have a look at the sort of the graphical workflow processes in more detail, but they are again only examples. E-permits will actually replicate whatever workflow process you have. So you may need 2 or 3 different people to sign off different types of permits and so forth. Whatever it is that you need, that's what e-permits will do for you. Okay, so hopefully that's been of interest. As you know, you'll be sent the link to the webinar, so you can always receive it. Please, by all means, circulate it around to your colleagues and anybody that may have an interest. My contact details are there on the screen. If anybody would like further information or a one-to-one chat or a one-to-one demonstration of the system itself, I'm happy to oblige and help you out on that. So I think there is a little chat box. If anybody has got any pertinent questions and they want to ask them at this point in time, please just fill in the chat box and go and send it. And my colleague Neil will be able to refer to me any questions that have actually come up. So I'll give you a few seconds to type in any questions that you may have. If any come in, Neil, just give me a call and just give me a holler and let me know what those are, and I'll try and answer them.
Yes, will do.
Okay, doesn't look like anything's coming in, so that was either an excellent presentation or I've put you all to sleep, one of the two. But I hope you enjoyed it, and please feel free to contact me at any time, and we'll now finish the webinar. So thank you very much indeed. Bye-bye.